So we've got a great panel. We squeezed them in. We got so many good folks up here. We had enough chairs, so we made it happen, right, Emil? So we'd like to invite you to join Emil Warner. She is the executive director of CED and the owner of Dandelion Creative Services. She's also the marketing consultant for the Saguache County Tourism Council and the Saguache Town trustee for our economic development panel. Thank you, Emil. Hello.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm really excited about this group of very talented, very smart people who are here with me today. And thank you for the weather for clearing. That was quite the little downpour a few minutes ago. When I say rural economic development, we're actually not even rural here. We're frontier. That's a literal term, frontier. And those of you who write grants know that money likes to be sent to rural areas. Sometimes frontier is a little harder. We don't have enough people per square mile sometimes. So how do we strengthen our economies here? How do we build economy and what might that look like in non-traditional ways? So those are some of the topics we're going to talk about. And I want to introduce this amazing group of people here with me today, and I'm going to just let them introduce themselves to get started.
Good afternoon, Crestone. My name is Wendy Stewart Martinez. I'm with the Office of Economic Development and International Trade, and you're my region, and I'm here to listen and learn and give back.
Good afternoon. I'm Barry Van Sant. I live in Saguache, Colorado. I am on the board with CED. I am involved with Mountain Valley Transit, which provides the SLV transit services around the valley. It used to be the Eagle Line. It was part of the Chaffee Shuttle, but today it's Mountain Valley Transit. And I guess I'm here to talk about transit and transportation in relationship to economic development out here. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Sheeran. I live in Crestone. I've been here about 19 years. And I don't belong to any group except the human race. So I'm here to just share what I've learned in my time living here and, thinking about ways to earn a living, make money, be part of the community. Anyway, I'm really honored to be here with all you guys.
I'm Theo Boudreau. I'm General Manager for Joyful Journey Hot Springs Spa. I'm President of the Saguache County Tourism Council. I'm also on the board of the San Luis Valley Tourism Association.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. My name is Natalie Montesino. I live in Fort Collins, but I've become a pretty regular visitor of the San Luis Valley lately, and I'm the executive director of a Colorado-based nonprofit called the Climate Democracy Initiative, where we work with all kinds of communities to ensure that environmental decisions are done at the behest of the community and with their benefits in mind, and excited to talk with you all today.
Hello, my name is Killian Liam Barrett. I'm the principal for Hearth Design Build. Our company was recently hired to design a model home for the Saguache County Housing Authority. And I'm excited to be part of this and help connect housing to this broader topic.
Okay, so what I want to start off with is Wendy first. It's in your job title, Rural Economic Development. So can you share with us the unique challenges that we face as rural economies versus more urban areas? Cover that first, and like any very distinctive aspects that we should be aware of.
Sure, thanks, Amy. So as a state employee, the office that I work for and through is OEDA, Office of Economic Development International Trade. About 3 years ago, the leadership saw the divide coming. It's always been there, but they were aware of it and created an office to be a bridge between the metro area and the metro mind with all of us out here in rural frontier Colorado. So I actually live in Chaffee. I travel the state, and that's what we do is look for ways to not only bridge that gap and to be that megaphone into Denver, but also to answer your question even better is that our leaders are starting to understand a little bit better through the work that we've been doing for the last 3 years, and that is to see that there's a lot of struggles out here. The tax base is so different than the metro area, right? There's broadband issues, there's electrical issues. They're hearing it from us, they're understanding it a little bit better. But the opportunity is huge from what we can do in these areas, that the innovation actually comes out of these areas, and they're seeing that and embracing ways to work and match our areas where we're at. So it's an exciting time. It's a challenging time. There's only 2 of us in this office right now working the entire state. So to be here with you now, I'm so grateful, and I'm so energized with what I'm going to learn and take back and work with the local leaders. And that's what it takes, is to figure out what your innovation looks like, where you want to go, what your economy already is, and maybe where you want to move it in any direction, and how the state resources can do with that.
Thank you. Natalie, you have worked globally on rural economic development. And so I think sometimes we think we're unique, maybe in the United States or Colorado to being rural. You've actually worked on a global scale in Japan. You're starting to do work in Canada. Can you share some of those experiences and maybe where some crossovers are?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll share a little bit about my experiences in Japan first. So from 2022 to 2023, I lived in Okayama Prefecture, if anyone's familiar with the geography of Japan by chance. It's in between Hiroshima and Osaka, southern Japan, and it's majority rural. And my role was as a research assistant with a local university to explore how rural revitalization efforts were actually taking place through different village efforts. And so many of you may or may not know that Japan as a country is experiencing some pretty challenging trends as far as economic stagnation and population decline, aging population. And their rural areas in particular are very hard hit by those trends. There's a current figure that estimates there are 9 million homes in Japan that have been abandoned, and the majority of those are in rural areas. There's also some figures that suggest every single year, tens of villages become completely abandoned. They become ghost towns in Japan. And so everyone has this interest in, well, how do we protect those areas? Because they are cultural centers, they're historical centers. They're really important to our national identity, but they are falling away. So how do we protect those things? And that was the purpose of my research. And I looked at 3 different case studies during my year in Japan where a community had moved away from some kind of extractive industry, whether that be fishing or timber, and they had transformed their local economies by taking a look at the assets, the environmental assets that they already had, and becoming a steward of those and not sending them out of the community, but rather keeping them local and keeping them sustainable. And so that's really how some of these communities were able to transform from being a place with a declining environment, a declining economy, and a declining population into a place that was attracting lots of young people to move and live there. They had a booming economy, new tourism, new recreation activities. And when I went in, I didn't have any particular hypothesis about maybe why these communities had been able to transform themselves. But truly the theme that ran across all of them was, again, focusing on those environmental assets and making sure that the community, most importantly, was deciding for themselves, here's how we would like to use those assets and these opportunities, and here's the future that we have all collectively dreamed together. And in that way, I found that many of the residents that I interviewed, they all had a stake in actualizing that future. They were all invested in making it a reality. And I think that's what's different from a lot of the environmental development that we see here in the States, where it's very much outsider-led. It's people coming to your community and telling you, you should do this. But unless the community has decided that for themselves, it's not going to stick, and there aren't going to be people to sustain and maintain that effort long-term, which is really what we need.
Okay, so that just sounded so much like the San Luis Valley, right? One of the things that I care a lot about is vacant and abandoned homes. How do we build our economy without it just being an extraction? Like, I think we're all weary of the model where outside organizations come in, they take what we have and leave us with very little. And so I think your insight is very valuable to that. Barry, I want to move to you. Barry is really deeply involved in transit, and I never thought transit was very exciting until I started hanging around with Barry. It's actually so important, and I would love for Barry to share like how transit, the lack thereof, impacts the economy of Swatch County and the broader San Luis Valley.
Okay, well, thanks, Amy. Transit in the valley. You know, we didn't have any for a long time. The valley in the early 1900s had a great train system that took people in and out of the valley, took them across the valley, took them to the Front Range, moved everybody around. And right after World War II, they shut down the train system. And I think that's really was kind of the beginning of this isolation of a lot of little towns in the valley. We had regional bus, you know, the Greyhounds and the Continental Trailways, but you know those are all for-profit entities. There wasn't anything such as subsidized transit in the middle part of the 20th century, and so a lot of our little towns and a lot of the people in the rural areas basically, well, it became a transit desert. I've heard that term in other rural areas in the United States, but so it's only recently, since about 2018, when we started to run a shuttle. It was called the Eagle Line, that would take people from Swatch and Center and the more remote little towns to Alamosa once a week to do the shopping, and north to Salida once a week to get their essential goods and services. And that's helped. It's been a big help. It's really serves that disproportionately impacted community, you know, the low income, those who don't have cars, the elderly, the disabled. I mean, it's done a good job of getting these people to the services they need from an economic standpoint. Obviously, if you can keep somebody healthy, they're going to have less impact on your community. They're going to do well. Also, of course, they're bringing economic input to the communities that they're going to. They're buying and selling things, but really, there's a long way to go with transit and moving people in the San Luis Valley. What we really need, you know, to really, you know, stimulate businesses in the smaller towns. You know, the Alamosa and Salida are very, you know, pretty vital communities that have a broad breadth of services. But for most of us who live remotely here, we have to travel, you know, 100-mile round trip to go to the doctor, go to Walmart, or go see friends, or go play golf, or whatever you might want to do. So what we really need is to expand our transit and transportation infrastructure. By that I mean, you know, our roads, our bike paths, our rail service, et cetera, so that people come to this valley and want to live here, but they say, there's a great job, but it's 50 miles away, and I can't get to it. But I want to live in Crestone. So, or they find a job in Salida, and housing is sky high, and so they have to live in Saguache in order to work in Salida, but there's no commuter level transit service to get them there. So uh, in businesses and the economies depend on employees, they depend on customers, and they depend on that supply chain for the businesses to get goods in and out. And that's all part of the transportation infrastructure and expanding that and growing that. And that's kind of a long-term view, but like I said, we currently have a pretty good start on it with getting people from the remote communities. You know, we have a Creed to Alamosa route and Antonito to Alamosa. We come to Crestone once a week to connect people with the interregional bus in Moffett to get them out of the valley. So there's the impact of a strong transportation infrastructure is really it's going to take to incentivize people to come and live here and people to come and invest and open new businesses, like the kind of businesses you might want here in the town of Crestone. It might be a clothing store or a pharmacy, or maybe you need a doctor in town here. I know in Saguache, I can list all of those. We need them all. So that's basically it.
Thank you. So in my work with CED in economic development, I feel like there's all these big cogs that are kind of frozen, and they just have to like get some grease on them to get all these things moving. To me, the grease is money, right? That the economy and moving. And I think the two biggest cogs are transit and housing. Like housing is such an issue of affordable housing. I mean, if you're retired and you're bringing a lot of money, you can live anywhere you want. If you're trying to start a family, if you're trying to start a business, it's the housing model. So, Killian, I'm going to jump over to you, and like, does transit and housing, is there any crossover? Do you see like one is more important than the other? And then what kind of models of housing development can be implemented in the San Luis Valley?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm not a transport guru, but I came originally from Ireland, where there's a lot more priority on density and a lot more thought to planning than typically I encounter in the Southwest, where it's sort of, you know, more like do what you want style, and you know, and so there isn't really a focus on growing from centers like community centers and density where you can have like traditional forms of effective transportation. Mixed development that can help with that a lot too, where you actually have housing and businesses put together. It's hard to say which is more important than the other. Part of our company's mission is that we really value sort of the triple bottoms lines: people, planet, and profits. And so when we look through those lens, we use a framework called resource conscious construction. And so we look at things as objectively as possible to say, okay, well, what are the resources we have? We're not going to call them good and bad. We're going to be like, okay, like how do we, you know, maintain environmental stability? How do we create circular economies with every action we make, whether we're deciding to buy lumber from, you know, 2 counties over or from a local sawmill? And like, does it cost more money? Probably, but is that money staying locally? Yes. And what is the impact of that? And then there's a social aspect, and all three of those are very tied together. And so the more, like you can say, like there's also an economy of, like a social economy. And so like the more sharing you have, just as a general concept, the better communities you get, whether you're sharing your money, whether you're sharing space, whether you're on a bus together instead of driving multiple vehicles to the same place. It's a huge environmental cost of that. There's a couple of examples. I'll talk about transport and how that's interacted with a bit more with construction than housing, but related. Like when I was living and working in Vermont, I was working on my first straw bale house, and there was 10 Subarus sitting in the driveway. And I looked at, and we'd all come from like at least 50 miles away, because Vermont's kind of similar in some ways to here, that it's like you have to drive pretty much to go anywhere. It's a rural area. There isn't great transport. Their barrier is more mountains and passable roads and post desert, but all the same issues. And I always wondered, I was like, well, what if a local, non-hippie group of people came and drove the same van together and picked up the guys on the same route? What would the final environmental impact be? And in our project for Habitat for Humanity, a straw bale project in Gunnison, we actually got the answer because we had a MEM project, thesis project, masters, that showed that even though we were building this environmentally friendly house, because all our volunteers were driving from all over the county in their trucks, it was nowhere near the carbon sink that we thought it would be, purely because of the transport. And so when it comes to, like, if they'd all jumped in one, international 1975 bus that gets 2 miles to the gallon, that would have been better than them driving all these new modern vehicles. And it just struck me like two things. One is, like, transport is huge if we're looking at environmental impact, and not to mention the social and financial impact of supporting the businesses and the systems through which we get those energies, such as fossil fuels. In Gunnison County, which is a lot of resources, very rich county, and by a lot of standards, like, they have free transport, and it's fantastic. And they, have a natural gas powered fleet of buses. Although natural gas, and hopefully I'll go electric someday. But, like, when I look about transport and housing, I'd say yes, construction, industry, housing, there's a huge connection there. I don't pretend to have the answers for, like, communities like this that are very spread out. But when I think about how to do economic development, I think, well, how can we create density in, like, say, an industrial park, where even if you live in different places, how do you find those I don't think of the word, but like those focus points where you can get people to transport them to somewhere where then they can engage in their livelihood, and ideally that livelihood is community focused. No.
Thank you. So Theo,
I'm still on Killian.
yeah. So I want to. So that very concept, because you are one of the Joyful Journey is one of the larger employers. Is it the largest employer in Saguache County?
The hot springs in general,
Yeah.
the 3 hot springs. So Joyful Journey employs about 50 people. Sand Dunes Pool probably has about the same number. And Orient Land Trust has a little less. So 3 hot springs, yes.
So large employer driven, and you have employees probably from a base that those folks would love if they had an option other than getting in their cars to drive to work. We've talked about models of transit. But skipping over to the wellness and the tourism side, I'd love for you to speak about how does tourism attract the right kind of visitors? How might some of these topics be impacted by tourism, and also just the wellness? I think in Crestone is a wellness community to large regard. How do we promote that and make it an economic driver while sustaining the quality of life that we all love here?
Okay, good point. I'm going to start a little bit higher in regards to this, because I always find it interesting. I report to the Colorado Tourism Office, basically. They're what I consider our bosses. Part of the Wendy's program, which is OEDIT. And I always find this fascinating. We do a gathering every year of all the counties that get together and discuss tourism in general. But one thing I continue to find fascinating is the DIA. I'm going to start with DIA. Is the sixth busiest airport in the world. And I don't know if any of us recognize any of that, but it is the 3rd busiest in the United States. So you have all these people coming through the Denver metro area, or the airport at least, and we want to be able to attract those travelers' attention. Last year alone, it was $84 billion of tourism dollars that was brought into the state of Colorado, supporting just about 190,000 employees' jobs, direct jobs, okay? Now, in regards to Joyful Journey and employment, when I first came, I bought in the Baca accommodations in 2001. I came back to help Elaine Blumenheim with Joyful Journey Hot Springs in 2014. When I started there, I had 14 employees, and we grew to currently 50 employees. Those employees, I don't get many employees. Most of my massage therapists are from the Baca Crestone area. A lot of my employees are coming from the KV area and or Saguache, and it is because of transportation. A lot of people don't want to take the drive. I do have a family member that is driving to Salida for employment, and the pass is something that they're squeamish about in regards over the winter season. So transportation is huge. And I think we would get more people to travel and or for employment with transportation. The idea of, getting employees in a rural area is difficult in general. And I kind of want to just point this out too, as Joyful Journey with employees and such, I think it's important to know that not just Joyful Journey, but the other hot springs and the sales tax that is accumulated through tourism dollars. And I have no problem just letting you know that Joyful Journey pays $8,000 to $10,000 a month in sales tax. That basically gets back into the county as well as the state itself. This is money that is being put back into the community when you guys are looking for your sales tax grants and asking for those funds. Tourism is what's supporting that and paying for some of that, and that's very important. To have this event or any other events that are coming across our counties, we want people to come in and spend their money. For every $1 that is spent on advertising, you receive $184 of that in tourism dollars. So it's quite a return on the dollars. And I don't know if I'm getting sidetracked, Amy, on your question, because I'm just enthusiastic about tourism in regards to it as a whole, in regards to what we can do as a community. There is a 5280 magazine that just came out in September for publication. It does focus, 5280 focuses on Colorado. It's a Colorado magazine. But it did speak of wellness. Two of the hot springs, Joyful Journey and Orient Land Trust, was mentioned in the 52 magazine as for places to retreat and heal. But the whole publication in September was about, I wish I could remember the title because they even used the F word in the front of the magazine. We talked
It's
about
like
that.
what the F is there to do in Saguache County.
Yeah, that too. But anyways, it is important, and the wellness is important. And I think as a community, we need your commitment, and we need you to hear from you. We did a survey several years back with CTO, Colorado Tourism Office. You all want your privacy, and you all want to live without tourists, but they also realized the communities know they need tourists here. We know we need it, okay? We need it to survive and to promote, because all of us are not going to support the restaurants or the retail establishments as a regular basis living here in our own communities. So it is a difficult situation. What we want to do is get ahead of it. And I think with our board members, I've been on the board for 10 years. Christine Guidenson's been on it longer than me. Faith O'Reilly out of Saguache. And we got Nate Wood out of Crestone, and Gigi out of Saguache. Some newer members, some fresh faces. So it's basically bringing that team together and working over the years that we have worked to understand what you guys want as a community and promote what you want as a community. And I do agree with you, Emil, that even our county as a whole could be a place of wellness. Okay, our numbers increased in 2020 when we needed to have that isolation. Saguache County itself saw so many people coming through in the year 2020 than they ever did in the prior years previously. So it can be a place of wellness. I really do support that, either with the hot springs and with Crestone itself at its wellness centers, as well as the communities of Saguache. And if you guys haven't been paying attention to Center, you need to lately. It's got a lot going on. A lot of changes, I think, that are possibly occurring, as well as keeping on to its heritage and promoting, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. So, Marianne, you're sitting right in the middle, and
I
you're
am
like,
right in
"What
the
am I
middle."
doing here?" So, I will say that when the Crestone Energy Fair asked me to do this panel, the original title was Alternative Economies, which I didn't quite get. So, they allowed me to change the term to rural economic development, which I do to get. But Marianne is here as a representative of that voice for alternative economy. She has had a life experience, and I want to talk more about that in a minute, but in lieu of the visitor experience, do you see any way for non-traditional economies to reach out to visitors? And I'll nudge you and say, like, what comes to mind is, can a person stay at a ranch or a farm and make their way by doing a little work on there? Can you speak to that at all?
Well, I can speak to it by saying that's a darn good idea. you know, there are schools that are doing that with their kids and farming them out to different areas that are agricultural, animal based, and teaching them. So why not give that experience to other adults coming through? And there's a lot of, the agriculture areas, even some of the smaller businesses might like having somebody learn from them. I don't know. I'm speaking as somebody who moved here in 2006, and we started building a straw bale home. And coming from central Michigan and growing up in northern Minnesota, this Finlander couldn't quite grab all of that. But my son fortunately lived here, and he gathered a group of his friends. You talk about a community getting together to do something, and we built a beautiful home, and I'm still living there. But just watching that whole process and having it be a learning experience rather than being afraid. I also brought my 2 horses from Michigan, so they were at the stables at the time. And, just watching different people come through and giving trail rides and riding lessons to people that were from the Front Range or from other states or who knows, and having that small experience. I guess, from my viewpoint, it's a skills assessment thing, and it was for me because I had a degree as a lab tech. Oh, whoopee. I was going to drive to Salida to the hospital every day over the past to work.
Lou.
I know they do, and they have my, gratitude, but I wasn't going to do it, and I'm still not going to do it. It's just the way it is. Lost my train of thought. Just thinking about all the different things that I've done while I've lived here. And one of the biggest for me was bartering. And I've always kind of had it in the back of my head, why don't we have a barter bank where people can say, here's my skills, and you can hook up with that person and trade, I don't know, dinner or help with house cleaning, or I've done riding lessons and horse work. I've bartered that. I've bartered sewing. I've bartered, a lot of things. But, we don't realize that we all come here to this earth with gifts and talents and skills. And we're so, I couldn't do that, or I don't know. It's good to have a good friend to sit with you and maybe help bring that out. Say, well, I see this in you, or I see that in you. You have leadership qualities, or you're a good, you're a good cook. Why don't you do some cooking lessons or something? Sustainability with gardening. But turning our community into something that utilizes, my dad used to say this, and he grew up during the Depression. And he used to say, fix it up, use it up, wear it out, or do without. And we live in some of you may have heard that before, but we live in such a disposable society. And everything is, okay, I'll use this shirt, and when it's done, it goes in the trash, or we have a free box. Best idea in the world. But to be able to fix things, reweave a sweater with a hole in it. Can you take stains out of things or make something out of something, a dress out of an old drape? Yeah, it's all doable. Those are the things that excite me, and looking at a community that's so diverse and so independent. We're all kind of like, here I am, this is what I do. To learn from each other and to be able to express that learning and that care for all of us, because we are all talented people. We really are. And it doesn't mean a 9 to 5 job necessarily. You know, reporting for a steady paycheck is nice, but there's a lot of ways to be part of a community and still make your way. And it doesn't necessarily result in money, but the barter system is, I'm enchanted with that whole thing. And I've watched it and I've been part of it. And it works beautifully. And, you know, I'm giggling with the transportation thing. Yeah, because my neighbor right across the road, she and I volunteer at the food bank. She leaves and goes, and I leave and go, and there we are at the food bank, and then we drive home. And I keep thinking, you know, I grew up in an area where my dad carpooled to the mines to work. They all carpooled. Everybody was very cautious about spending money on gas and wear and tear on your vehicle. You're always asking somebody, I'm going to Alamosa, do you want to come along? Can I get you something? Those are that awareness, I think. We're all used to this sort of independence. I can drive wherever I want, whenever I want. And that's an example. That's just a small example. But we're all in this boat together. And we're all rowing like crazy. But where are we going? Anyway, that's kind of me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.
So, Killian, that makes me think about the work that you're doing with youth and mentorship and the trades specifically, like teaching the next generation skills that if they want to stay here, they can stay here. Or, and can you explain the work that you're doing in the building? What is
I got it.
entrepreneurship? I'm sorry, I've lost it. You know what I'm talking about. Explain that, please.
First, I just want to comment on that because that's very much that's very dear to my heart because I think like inherently like community is efficient. There we go. So I think like it's very important to like as we look at transport, housing, economies, just in general like there is this broader influence on us, and this is relevant to construction, but pretty much every industry we can think of. I heard someone asking early on about AI, and sorry.
What was our sound? We have a sound guy.
Okay, thank you. I think it's a conversation that's not being had enough, but AI and robotics is an existential threat to human culture across the board, and it's that reason. It's because like, hey, I can. In theory, in 10 years, I could just buy a robot for $500,000 that I can get financing for that can do everything a human can do. Why would I have a human, right? Really scary, guys. And that's part of the reason why I was really excited about coming to this fair was because it feels very human-centered. And like I said, everything that we're trying to do with our work is, as best as I can describe it, an antithesis to that. And when we think about like things that are happening at a higher level, both politically and economically, with tech and finance, they don't have our interests in heart. They're all extractive to us, to what we try to do in our daily life, and specifically to communities like this. Right? It's very tempting. We all do it. We all buy stuff because it's easy. We all get sucked into it. But like as much as possible, I think like the work that we do and the way that we hold these conversations, I think is really important to not ignore that elephant in the room because it's really dangerous. I'm genuinely scared for us, but I'm optimistic when I come to an event like this because I see someone when it's thunderstorm and lightning out in their bare feet getting in mud. When I'm getting cold, and I grew up in Ireland where it rains all the time and it's horrible like this all the time, and I'm not doing that, So like it's very encouraging. It's exciting to see that. And so, yeah, to your question about how Hearth and this emerging program called Trades Culture is addressing that is we say, well, how can we best use the resources we have consciously? And this is where our framework that we operate in resource consciousness comes from, and I'll be talking about that on Sunday, is like, okay, well, we have youth that want something to do. They're leaving. We have plenty of grease available, both whatever about the federal level, we have it at the state level. We have people who across political and social boundaries are like have so much more in common than we have different, and that's always the thing that surprises me in this country in particular. Is like, oh, we're different. It's like, no, we're not. We're really similar, and there's people at the top who are, you know, blasting at us that we're different, and they're winning if we agree with them, and it's just not true. And so we're working with youth programs, both at high school level. We're working with trades programs, not just in Colorado, but also in northern New Mexico. I'm working with university students in Gunnison, and we're trying to figure out how to tie all that together for the biggest impact. And my sandbox is construction, and just happens to be an incredibly resource-rich industry, and also an incredibly wasteful one. And I'll say straight off the bat, because it's not diverse. You know, like again, this community of builders, I'm like, look around, it's like there's a lot of diversity here, way more than you see on most job sites throughout probably the world. And like when you have diversity, you have so much more of a resource. And construction in particular, like on job sites, we're cut off from half the population almost most of the time in construction sites. Talking about, you know, a gender divide. And so when we were looking at our programs too, we're like, how do we get youth, retired folks, men, women, whatever, like gender identity, whatever culture you come from, how do we just get to the same place where we can be like, hey, we all need to eat, we all need to commune, we all need to have shelter, and how can we create this Trojan horse of sorts where we can be in the same place and get to understand each other's humanity. And so like diversity is like number one. However we can create that, and like I said, we, you know, in a good tide, all boats rise. The more, if you have 10 different opinions, if one of those is something new, that's worth it. If you have 10 of the same people, you're not going to get anything new. And it's just like constantly missing opportunities. And in construction, there's just so much money. There's so much resource. There's so much waste every day that while we're trying to do something better with the resources that we have, to like have these larger impacts, to bake in things like we're going to be teaching critical thinking to our staff and to our community in the next few weeks. You know, nonviolent communication, like communication in general, just like having those pieces baked into like, today we're going to be doing framing, but we're also going to be teaching you how to be a better human being. And, you know, especially if you get them young, you know, we teach building science to high school kids. That's the primary topic of the curriculum for our high school program. And that's, if you think about that, we're teaching science related to building. There is not a easier or better way to teach science than this thing won't stand up unless this thing's on top of it, or vice versa. And if you set this thing on fire, or you leave it sitting in water, or, you know, you're going to be in danger. You know, so like the first thing we do as an example, on our first day, which was last week, we got the students to say, hey, have you got a working carbon monoxide and fire alarm in your house? And they're like, we don't know. Like, we'll go home and potentially save your family. So like that's just a very simple way to start. It's like there's a real consequence to being engaged with housing. And that's a big part of it too, is like engagement. And yes, we can use technology to help that, but the grounds of it is always a social connection, to be like, you know, you're not just a kid who lives in a house, you're a family member, and you can potentially be someone who keeps your family safe. And like with the half of the students or more that we're working with in Gunnison, like culturally, their connection to family is, you know, with kind of a more like South American kind of Latino community, like families are really easy thing to grab onto. With kind of more Anglo-Saxon, that's, you got to kind of like phrase it a different way, but it's like once you start to find that center ground of family, you know, support, like being providers. You know, half of our students at 15 years old are already doing construction. You know, and in a ranching community or a farming community like this, you know, your kids work. That's what they should do. They absolutely should do that. And then you're getting into entrepreneurship. You're getting into resource management at a young age. So yeah, like I could talk about a broader spectrum of how I can see a community like this can build actual like entrepreneurial development. But I don't want to hog it for too long.
And so that's such a great topic for the energy fair, because that is what's happening here, right? We're talking about alternative building, not just in the structural stuff, but the social stuff as well. And I think Crestone is a rich resource, like the kids running around here, and you see that the parents really invested in these kids being able to run in the mud barefoot. So I think there's a lot of, this is an audience that hears what you're saying. Natalie, I'm really curious because as Killian's talking, Japan seems to have a lot of the building methods there. Can you speak to any that might inspire this group in the work that you've seen abroad?
Sure. Yeah,
Specifically housing.
specifically housing. I was thinking a little bit earlier when we were talking about the abandoned housing crisis that's here in the San Luis Valley and across the US, but it's also, as I mentioned earlier, a really large issue in Japan. I said earlier that there's about 9 million estimated houses in Japan that are abandoned, and the national government's tried all kinds of strategies to get people to move into these spaces because many of them are still habitable. They've even done programs where they give you the house for free or they pay you to take the house if you commit to living in that given community for X number of years. Maybe it's 5 years, 10 years. And that sounds like an awesome deal, right? You pay me to move somewhere and have a free house. That's awesome. But these programs are widely unsuccessful because we aren't considering the broader social network that needs to be in place, whether that be transportation, job opportunities, otherwise, that would inspire somebody to stay. But it's not all bleak. I have seen some really cool examples of alternative housing methods, which I'll speak to. One of the communities that I researched during my time in Japan had been a very rich historical district. So in the 1600s, the warlords of Japan would always stop in this particular town on their way to Tokyo. It was like a rest spot. It had a great history, a great culture. Of course, there's no more warlords moving to Tokyo anymore. And so this town was saying, man, we have all of these beautiful historical homes, giant manors that have just fallen out of use. Nobody is living in them, but we don't want to tear them down because they're historical buildings and they represent our history, our heritage, our identity. So what can we do with these stranded assets, these assets that are not being used by our community today, to bring in new tourism, which is huge? How can we use it to revitalize our economy? And how can we also use it to inspire our young people to stay in town? So this particular community, what they did was a survey and focus group, participatory democracy type initiative where they actually had the high school students in the town lead the effort to say, what could we do with these buildings that would make you excited about living here? And of course, the students had all kinds of ideas, many of which were not possible. Like they wanted arcades and they wanted, like a dance club to go to. And we can't necessarily do that. But what they did do was start to create some really fun cafes and interactive museums, transforming the houses into places that people wanted to live in and also play in, which is really important when we're thinking about our social wellness and our social economies. And not only did it become an asset for the residents that lived there, but it also became something that outsiders, tourists, were really interested in experiencing for themselves. So an unintended outcome of transforming these stranded houses, these abandoned houses, into something that was more reflective of the current community's priorities and values was that it became an economic driver. We had people from all across Japan coming to see these transformed historical houses, and their economies really started to boom.
That is so interesting. Leave it to the kids to come up with the innovative ideas, right? Yeah. Wendy, we had a conversation just before this panel about OEDIT's interest in housing. Do you want to speak to that at all?
Sure, happy to. I might just point out that I see a trend here and a thread for our tapestry. We can't turn it over yet. It's really messy, and I don't always understand it, but I'm seeing it. So thanks, you guys, for just sharing. And the idea of what we were exploring was the housing in the valley, in Saguache County, maybe more specific, and the need that's there, and the state knows that, and how do we work together? So we were brainstorming with some board members on what that would take to not only tap some funds and some resources, but to paint the picture beyond just roofs over heads. The economy could come out of the houses that are needed with potential workforce, potential just light manufacturing that matches where you want to take it. So that tapestry one day is your story to tell. I travel and people will say, we don't want to be Breckenridge, thank God. thank God that you want to be who you are. And what does that look like? So we'll continue to talk with this brainstorming, but it's trusting your leadership, supporting your leadership, finding your grassroots leaders, and getting involved too. I know some of us are like, I don't want to be on a board. I may not have time or expertise, or it's too scary. Well, that's okay, because there are committees or just one little level within a nonprofit or a government agency that you could just sign up for one thing, just to tap your toe into it. And that's what it takes, is all of us. You don't have to do it, but it does help and it does work.
Thank you. So we're doing pretty well on time. Anybody else here want to speak on housing before we move on?
I have one more thing. Is that okay?
Yeah, by all
Well, I
means.
love the theme we had with, we went to international and tourism, and how many of us get to travel or have traveled even through movies, and you see Latin American ideas, European ideas that match transportation. Like, gosh, wouldn't it be nice to have the train system again, or like Europe? So there's a lot we can still learn and we can research. But I did learn in some of my economic development training recently that the one thing we have that other countries don't have is the history on public-private, working with nonprofits, and funding streams through that. So we do have this kind of leg up that we can lean into that I hadn't thought of until listening to everybody talk. So thank you.
I just want to just one comment on just talking about the Saguache County, and specifically in relating to housing and the resources that it creates or it requires to create housing. Part of why our company was hired, I think, was because they came and saw what we'd done with Habitat for Humanity in Gunnison. And when I was being interviewed by the commissioners, they said, "Well, can we build a house like that in Saguache?" And I was like, "90% of this house came from your county." So the answer is absolutely you can. And a little pitch for like the idea of prefab is like with transport, basically you can be in a regional player, and with the resources that you have in this county and with the need for employment and with the educational opportunities you have, I don't see why Saguache couldn't be actually a regional leader in starting modestly with its own housing, but also providing housing to these communities that like they were having to commute to. It's like, no, don't commute. Work here and put your product on a truck, hopefully an electric truck, and ship it out. And there's no reason why you can't work from your ranch, where you can't get money for agricultural funding to help like basically take what is often a primary industry, like we were talking about, like industries like if you're having extractive industries where you're sending wheat out somewhere else to get processed, or you're sending wood somewhere else to be turned into like if you do it here, you inherently empower your own community by creating like second and third level industries here. It's totally possible, in my opinion. So.
Yeah, when Killian shared that with me, I got really excited about the idea of prefab manufacturing happening here. This is probably an audience that could really get excited about that, like entrepreneurial opportunity, housing opportunities that solves a lot of interesting problems. Andy's got another idea.
I just want to share, because of the crowd that we have, this doesn't mean creating historical, modular, cheap, poor quality housing. I actually mean totally opposite. You can create high performance, environmentally friendly, carbon sequestering, educational rich, and craft driven housing. Like, I mean, and that's a huge piece. Again, I see all this here. This isn't about a prefab historical modular. This is about creativity and about feeling engaged. And I think we can do both.
So we're coming up on the point where we can reach out to the audience for questions. Before we do that, I just want to ask everyone here, there's one point that you would like to leave, like if this audience would remember one thing that you brought to this conversation, what would that be? And then audience, we're going to give you some time to really talk with these folks about questions you have about, like, really boots on the grounds. Do you have an idea or something like that? So, Killian, the mic is down by you. You've done enough. We know. Okay, go ahead, Natalie.
Okay. I saw that question on our question list when it was sent around, and I had to give it some thought because it's hard to sum up all of the threads or turn over the tapestry like you were saying. But I wrote mine down, so hold on, let me Let me find out where I wrote it down. And I know I've talked a lot about international work, but we're a Colorado-based organization, and we work with lots of communities here in the state. And I think the thread that has been true for every place that I've worked in, every community I've worked with, is that sustainable environments, sustainable economies, and resilient communities are created when residents are in charge and are driving the approach, and they are invested in the outcomes. That's the key.
Absolutely.
I am going to do a shout out for Breckenridge. You guys should be pretty proud. Dark Skies last week when we celebrated but Breckenridge is the first resort community that has been initiated into the Dark Skies. And if you can imagine what it would take for a community of that size to be initiated as part of the Dark Sky community, that took a lot of work. We're hoping the San Luis Valley can do this as a whole in regards to appreciating the night sky. We have Care for Colorado Coalition, which we belong to. They had a meeting just yesterday and discussed the Dark Sky Initiative. And they were projecting that at least the children born today, 80% of them will not even be able to see the Milky Way. And that's what they're projecting out there. If we were to take anything here, at least in regards to tourism, I think you spoke to it. Basically, it takes our community to step up and to speak up. We can do tourism right in Saguache County. We are learning the wrong way from the I-70 corridor and what they're doing to turning things around in their side. But we can do it right. But it takes our community to step up and let us hear what you guys want to do and where you want to take it. But we do need tourism, okay?
Golly, I don't know. I'm really excited about all of you and what you shared. But my thought is that we all want and need the same things. We're more alike than we are different. And in a culture right now that's stressing differences and pitting us against one another, realizing that just doesn't matter, and it's not the truth. The truth is we all are in this boat rowing together, and there's a lot that we each have to offer to the process, whether it's helping someone build or doing diagnostics on a community or helping with the watershed, regenerative farming, all kinds of things that are happening that are wonderful. And those are the things I would like to focus on. I hope you do too.
Thank you. I'd just like to maybe throw a little perspective out there about how special we all are here in the San Luis Valley. And so I don't think people really realize, and I think it makes us special, but it also can create barriers for progress. Our regional business area is 7 counties. We're 9,000 square miles of people, I should say more land than people, between the 6 counties in the valley here and including Chaffee County, because Salida is a key economic component of our economy here. We have 8 people per square mile in this business region. I have other examples, but I'm going to jump to the greater LA Basin. The greater LA Basin has 7,500 people per square mile. So I bet you're glad you don't live there. But a lot of the economies and a lot of the models out there that are pushed to provide additional services to grow towns and communities, they're focused on these larger population densities. Transit, it works wonderfully if you have 500 people per square mile. Let's just run a route up Colorado Boulevard, and it'll be really effective. But here, we have to move people. We have to be smart about it. And we can be a lot smarter. We have a long ways to go. But one thing we are working on now is there are a lot of van pools, there's a lot of shuttles, there's a lot of bus services, private and public, and we're working now on trying to create a database of all these different ride providers, these ride services, public and private, and then we're trying to look at the gaps and look at the overlaps. And Crestone's unique because it's one way in and one way out. So it's always been a challenge for us to get a shuttle in here to pick people up and take them places. We do it, but we could do it a lot better. We don't have any local service circulating around the town of Crestone, which is needed to get people from the Baca to here and back. So we have to think out of the box living in rural America here. And so things like van pools and shipping, freight sharing, ride sharing, etc., will help. And if people see these things happening, they'll want to. They'll go, okay, I can live here. I can contribute. I do want to start a business. I want to open up a hardware store because I think I can get employees. I think I can get customers. And I think I can get my goods and services I need to be successful. I don't want to lose money. And what I see happening here shows vitality and promise. So, yeah.
Final thoughts? Last year, I was working with a community that bordered our tribal land here in the state of Colorado, and we were brainstorming and talking about what they're doing right, what the future might look like, how the state could help. And finally, this person said, we really need help with mental health. I don't have an economy here, Wendy, until we can figure out our mental health crisis. So that's my message to you today is take care of yourself, take care of others, stay grounded, and lean on your local leaders when you're ready to jump back into all of this. Thank you.
That was just a really great conversation. I feel like everyone here could talk for a very long time on their subject matter. So I'm going to put in a little plug for CED. CED stands for Saguache County Sustainable Environment and Economic Development. This is what we do. We care about our environment. We care about our economy. We want to move it forward in a sustainable fashion. CED hosts 3 coffee hours every month in 3 communities. We do one in Moffett, we do one in Center, and we do one in Saguache. They're really great opportunities. I bring in a guest speaker every time. It's this kind of conversations that we have. So if you will follow CED on Facebook, or if you look up our website, which is scseedco.org, you can just Google it and you'll find it. You can get more information on that. These conversations happen all the time. They're important, they're interesting. I never thought I would care about this stuff as much as I do. Thank you, panel, very much for being here. Let's give them a hand. And so, any questions in our last 10 minutes or so? Okay. Oh, Jay, she's got a burning dancing question over here.
Thank you guys so much, and I really appreciate everything you just talked about. And what I just kept thinking my concern is how do we create a new economy, the new world, given the constraints of our state laws, our county land use codes, and you're talking about you really love bartering. Well, be careful, because people want to tax the trades you make. And I don't know if it's happening here, but I know that happens in other places. And so I'm just really curious, have you seen how people are creating this new, new ways of interacting with each other and these new models? We want a laundromat in Moffett, and the cost is completely prohibitive because of the type of septic system required for a laundromat. So we don't have one. And so there's just these things that I keep bumping into that prohibit me from building a house, that prohibit, businesses from starting in our county because of the codes that the state requires, our county requires. And so where do we go, and how do we get through that and create this like amazing stuff we're dreaming of?
Who wants to tackle that? Not me. Let me answer that. That is the work that we do, right? And it's not easy work. It's joining one more board. We've already talked about this, Jay. Yes, I mean, there are steps. Liza's back there. Liza shows up and does the work. The CED board is trying to do the work. It is slow, grueling, hard work, and there's no easy answer. But it's people that show up, like all y'all do, and like take your corner and do what you can, and you move up forward. Like if we looked back 10 years ago, I bet we could identify a lot of things that have changed from then until now. And in my opinion, it's showing up where you can and doing what you can. And voicing, writing, and being active in your community.
I'll take this wave in the face. I'd say the short answer is culture. Having grown up in a very social country in Ireland and having lived all over the US and had the most success and advance in my career living places where there are no codes, where I can have the freedom to be able to experiment and do what I want. But those are also places where I found the largest health risks to people in home, specifically to housing. But that's when we talk about like regulations, is why do they exist? They're there to protect us, right? The police are there to protect us, but that doesn't mean that every institution that is there to protect us is always operating in our interest, particularly in individual cases. And so I say culture because you can't regulate your way out of a problem if people really don't want to be regulated. And I'm coming from Gunnison, where I think Gunnison is in the middle of that right now, where the Southwest often has this perfect combination of the worst of both worlds. Like, oh, we want to do something really good, but we don't want government. And so government gets hamstrung, and then government's like, well, we don't want to do too much. And then they get defunded, or they don't get enough funding to do what they can do fully. And it becomes this problem where people are like, don't tell me what to do. And they're like, well, I'm not telling you what to do. And then they're not giving you guidance. And so it's it's a difficult question, but I think with great freedom comes responsibility. And you guys might know David Eisenberg. He was just at a conference in Ghost Ranch, but he's the godfather of getting straw bale into the International Building Code. And when he finished that process, a technician, but also I'd say very much a human person, and he pivoted somewhat and was like, oh, actually the problem isn't like, it's not a technical problem we have, it's a communication social problem. And he realized inspectors and people, code officials, are constantly being told, why don't you let me do what I want to do? And they go, and then they become defensive, right? It's a very basic human problem, basically. And when he figured out, oh, actually, this isn't just about straw bale. This is like in general. It's like, why are you gonna make me not have like, clean water coming out of the effluent of the system that I've made? Like it's based on real science. And it's not to say science doesn't become, co-opted, corrupted by people who have, things to gain. That absolutely happens. But that's where it's like important to be like, most people want to do the right thing. And regulation and government is supposed to be a reflection of people's will. And like I said, you have this scenario in the US in general, particularly I think in the Southwest, and I'm sorry, as an outsider, passing comment, but you get the worst of both worlds. But I think at this point, in America, I think you still have this opportunity to be able to have enough freedom to be able to operate in such a way that you can actually transcend those barriers by recognizing like the actual fundamental goals of all the people involved. Like the code official wants you to be safe, and you assume they want you to be safe, instead of like, they're stopping me from doing what I want to do and I know better. Like that's not what we teach our children. Like that's not how we create community. We have to move from this competitive, conflict-based model to collaboration, to listening, and to giving each other the benefit of the doubt. Because I think, especially as, again, from higher up as fear and these very basic kind of human threats come to us, we stop acting from a place of this broader impact, and we start acting from a place of like fear and conservation and scarcity mentality. And that's just not true. That we have all the resources, you know, quote Wendell Berry, all we need is here. Yeah.
Just one small comment to add. I very much agree with all of the points that you just shared. And I think the unfortunate truth is that much of the policy that is created at the state level, at the national level, is done on behalf of rural communities rather than with rural communities. And I think you're absolutely right in saying all of the, well, no, I won't say all of it. A lot of it is done with the right intention in mind. It's to keep you safe, it's to protect our resources. But there are so many policymakers everywhere in the world that do not have the interests of rural communities front of mind. And until we break down some of the barriers, both social and communication barriers that exist, where we're actually working in coordination and in collaboration to say, here's actually what my community needs, and here's how the current policies or codes are blockers to that, we're not going to move forward. And so that's some of the work that we do, is creating those opportunities for dialogue and for a truly deliberative process, a democratic process to take place, so that our policies are reflective of what people want most, because our lawmakers don't do that currently. They try, but they don't always succeed.
We have 5 minutes left. I have another question.
Is there any other questions? Just come out of the video there. Okay. If you want to just say your name and the
Absolutely. Hi there. My name's Daniel. I'm an electrical engineer. And I just had a couple of comments. I really enjoyed your discussion here today. And so, in reverse chronological order, the discussion about the codes. In my experience, it seems like a lot of the code regulations were designed by the individuals that are selling the materials that are being required to be used, right? Like the companies that developed arc fault circuit interrupters, they lobbied the government to make these requirements, right? And so I do appreciate diverse communities with different standards, like this one. This community is more diverse with its standards, and I feel like these are the types of things that reflect your values quite a bit, because, I mean, to use non-toxic ingredients in building your walls, for example, these are reflections of the things you find important in life, right? So, and then on that note, you mentioned earlier the discussion about economic development. You know, a lot of people don't want to live in highly developed areas. You don't want to live in Breckenridge. I'm from Pagosa Springs originally. Spent decades watching family members getting priced out of their own town, and so it is kind of refreshing to see a community withhold its own standards, and because when development is sustainable, it is it's a joy. The actual act of building a community is joyful, but when it's unsustainable, it's a chore, and the people who do the work often are overtaxed, and it makes it more difficult to nurture the next generation of apprentices, as we were mentioning earlier. So besides that, my last comment, young lady in the middle, I forget your name, but I really loved your idea of a trade bank. That's brilliant. We should do that here. That would be great. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Any last parting? Chris. Okay.
Sorry, I'm a little late to the party, but I just wanted to ask, because you had mentioned Gunnison County, and I know that they are in the process of trying to pass the GORB Act, which is the Gunnison Outdoor Resources Protection Act. And they've been working on this, and it's to protect an enormous amount of land, public lands in Gunnison County. Gunnison County has like 80% public lands. And they worked cooperatively with all the interests for 12 years. 12 years. And it's now been introduced in both the House and Senate chambers. Even in these times, it has an opportunity to succeed. So, and they had to bring all the interests together to do that. And county commissioners and very specific organizations were very involved in that. So I just want to say that Gunnison is an example of what's possible.
Okay. Thank you all. Any other parting words from our wonderful panel? You have one?
Okay. It's raining. There's many of you may remember William S. Burroughs, an author of the 60s. And none of us, we all live here because this is a unique place. None of us want to see water shipped out of here, I don't think. And none of us want to see gentrification and the people who came here before us to be put upon by growth. But let's remember this, and I love this saying. He wrote, when you stop growing, you start dying. So even if it's just a little incremental bit, we need to keep growing. We need to get that person who comes to town and says, where can I live? And say, well, we have Rangeview and Saguache. We got a place for you. Don't go, stay, and become part of the community. If you love it here, you're unique, because not very many people do, and we want you to stay. So that's what I have.
Thank you, panel. It's been an honor to share this stage with you.